Good evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 29th take. Happy Kentucky Derby Eve, everyone. Live from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas. I'm your host, Bear Duplessis, as always, and I am so excited. Kentucky Derby Eve is here. The Kentucky Derby, the first leg of the Triple Crown. One of my favorite days of the year. Literally top 5 days of the year is tomorrow. I am so excited. I am like a little schoolboy. That is why I am dressed like a little schoolboy, but I am in the spirit of things, as you should be as well. For everyone that's tuning in, I really appreciate we had some technical difficulties earlier on, but hopefully everyone's tuned in right now. 9:30 p.m. Friday, Kentucky Derby Eve, and I'm so very excited to welcome my special guest tonight into ELOSOFUMARTAKES. For our 29th take is the co-owner of 2013 Kentucky Oaks champion, Princess of Sylmar, Mr. Jim Stanco. Jim, thank you so much. How are you doing tonight?
I am doing fantastic, and it is a pleasure to be here with you. Glad to talk some Kentucky Derby.
Happy Kentucky Derby Eve to you, sir.
Thank you very much. We got some good stuff to talk about.
It's going to be a fantastic race, and we're going to get into the really diverse field here in a second, Jim. But I gotta say that it's such it. I mean, even without the wonderful credentials that you come with, being the co-owner of a former Kentucky Oaks champion, you know, you and I have kind of had a chance to talk horse racing in general before, and then I found out the wonderful fact about the co-ownership that you have. With Princess and everything. But before we get even to talking about her, it was really just an awesome thing to learn about you and everything like that. And but you are co-owner with your uncle, Ed Stanco, correct?
Right. My uncle, Ed Stanco, is the principal owner of a partnership called Princess of Sylmar, of King of Prussia Stables. They're based out of Philadelphia. I want to say they've been owning horses for about 10 to 15 years, maybe longer. Princess of Sylmar was actually a home breed for my uncle. Princess of Sylmar came out of a mare that he owned by the name of Storm Dixie. So that was actually a horse that he had owned, and then it bred to a colt by the name of Majestic Warrior. Storm Dixie, or Princess of Sylmar, came along and actually got off to a slow start with her first race. Won on her second try, and then turned into the fantastic young filly that she became.
Now, 2013, what a whirlwind of a year! The Kentucky Oaks. I had misremembered when we first started talking about it. I had actually misremembered the race, or at least how much of an underdog she actually was in. I had said she was like a 12-1 shot, and you were like, no. So she. Am I right? Was she a 30-1 shot at the time?
36-1. In
36.
fact,
I'm still wrong. It's 36-1.
Every year at the Kentucky Oaks, I actually share this to Larry Colmus's page. He's the guy who calls the races for NBC. And when she crossed the line and won it, and he was not expecting her to be the winner, his closing comment when she crossed the line was, "She's 36-1." Just an incredible moment.
I mean, for your family, that just had to be such a awe-inspiring, tremendous, and I mean, how surreal was it?
Well, it's amazing. I was unable to be there the day of the Derby. I was actually, of all places, in Hawaii on a company trip at the time. And
you poor bastard.
Yeah, it was a terrible life event to miss. But I was actually watching it on a laptop in my hotel room. Tears literally streaming down my face. I was so happy for the family and for everything else. It was just an incredible experience. And one of my favorite pictures from that whole day was my uncle kissed his trainer, Todd Pletcher. And that was kind of a tradition started by another owner named Mike Rapoli, who has probably 50 horses with Pletcher. And my uncle's feeling on it was, if Mike gets to kiss him, so do I. So the other thing that really came out of that day that I'll remember forever, a family member by affection by the name of Will Ray was walking out of the Churchill Downs with the lilies over his shoulder that had been on the horse. And if I can find the picture, I'll ask Will if he still has it. I'll share it with you on Facebook so everybody else can see it too. It was quite the sight.
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic, man. What an awesome is, and what a privilege it is to have you with us today, Jim. I mean, I've had the privilege of interviewing and speaking with so many great people in the cigar industry, and that's how you and I met, of course. You're a frequent patron of Michael's Tobacco of Euless, where I am a tobacconist, and really appreciate it whenever you can come in. What are you smoking tonight, actually?
Today, I actually have something that you sold me just the other day at Michael's. I have a Kentucky Fire Cured from Drew Estate. It's actually a very nice follow-up to a pizza dinner. So a very nice way to end the evening.
Nothing like cured tobacco after a good Italian meal or Americanized Italian meal, and to set up the ambiance for the Derby tomorrow. That's fantastic. Kentucky Fire Cured cigar. It's very appropriate.
There
Absolutely.
you go.
Absolutely. So just to kind of recap on something else before we kind of dive into the field this year. Again, we met at Michael's Tobacco of Euless, where you're a frequent patron and everything. What just so I can kind of tie this into the whole cigar thing that I normally do a little bit more. What have you seen being around horse racing as much as you are and have been? Is the tradition of cigar smoking still something that we see prominently, in celebratory moments or even in casual moments around the horse track these days?
It depends on where you are. You still see it a lot. If you go out to Lone Star Park and you sit outside, you'll occasionally see the old guy or me. I guess I'm the old guy now, sitting there with his cigar in one hand and his racing form in the other. You do see that. I'll share with you a story, and this is deeply disturbing, but it's a great story. On a Belmont Day of 2014, Princess of Sylmar was running in a race on the undercard that day in a race called the Ogden Phipps. And once the race was over, there were 140,000 people there. This was the year that California Chrome was entered into Belmont to win the Triple Crown, and it was one of the biggest crowds they had ever had at the Belmont. Well, the lines for the restrooms were so long. The ladies' restroom line was about an hour and a half. And a couple of our cousins, female cousins, had to get in line with us to go in the men's room because that's just where we were. When you walked in, you saw the guy standing at the urinal, and they had a cigar in one hand and either the racing form or a sausage on a bun in the other. And I can only imagine how horrifying that was for a young lady who had never been exposed to the greatness of the Belmont restroom.
Oh my goodness. That is quite the imagery. Quite the imagery indeed. One image that, segueing that into an image that I'll never forget, one of my favorite moments as long as I've been alive when it comes to horse racing. I've seen some great races over the years, seen some great jockeys. Jerry Bailey, hailing from my hometown of El Paso, Texas. Of course, Victor Espinoza, Mike Smith, who's one of your favorites. And there's just some fantastic Gary Stevens, who came out of retirement a couple of years ago. He was retired, came back, and now I guess he's just never going to retire. So we've seen some fantastic jockeys in my lifetime and some fantastic stories as well. But the story that I remember that I loved the most was the 2012 Derby and subsequent Preakness afterwards, run by I'll Have Another. Two of the greatest comebacks. You hear all the time about, he's a late charger, or he comes from behind, or he doesn't lead the pack. He'd rather be behind and he comes from behind. You hear that expression a lot, and you see it from time to time. A good comeback is 10 lengths, 8 lengths, 5 lengths. You're like, wow, that's pretty damn impressive, and you get excited and you're on your feet and stuff. I'll Have Another. Probably the Preakness was definitely the better of the two races, but the Derby still, I will never forget that race, and they'll never forget that comeback. What an absolute race that horse ran. It was just fantastic.
It's always amazing that the one thing they say about gamblers is they remember their bad beats way better than they remember their big wins. But I think we all have that one race or two where we just had that and saw that incredible finish, and it's just embedded on your memory for the rest of your life.
It certainly will be with mine. But so on to this year's Kentucky Derby. Let's be a little bit, as we've waxed philosophical about the past, let's talk a little bit about the future. And the future is tomorrow. The 144th running of the Kentucky Derby. I'm so excited. Presented by Woodford Reserve. And even though they're not a sponsor of this show, like my good friends at Casa Cuevas, I toast with their beverage. This is a Woodford Reserve, and
what a wonderful drink it is.
Yes, it is. Thank you to the folks at Woodford Reserve for sponsoring this year's Kentucky Derby so that Jim and I have something to talk about tonight and get excited about. So a couple of interesting draws that I thought caught my eye right off the pole when the positions were drawn earlier this week. Of course, I had my eye on Mendelssohn, and we'll talk about Mendelssohn here in a moment. But a horse that you and I have talked about a little bit in the coming weeks, particularly because there's been kind of a lot of chatter about him, was Good Magic coming in the sixth position. We'll start in the sixth position tomorrow. What luck for that damn horse! 12-1 favorite coming out of the gate. Draws the number 6 position. I think he got the best draw of the whole lot. What do you think, Jim?
I think so too. This is a Chad Brown trained colt. It's been training really well. I watched some of the videos. Several friends of mine in the horse race world have been posting videos of just the daily gallops and the daily exercise, and he looks to be in really good shape. When you look back, I'm looking at the chart right now, and when you look back at his races, the last race that he did not win was the Fountain of Youth out of Gulfstream in South Florida. And the reality is that Promises Fulfilled just got loose on an early lead. And, the reality was they ran it pretty slow. And sometimes when you run it slow, those horses can finish well, and it's hard to close. So is it a throwout race? Probably not. I just think, the pace got away from him, and it just wasn't a great day. This Good Magic is the son of Curlin, which, of course, was a fantastic colt in his day. Gosh, I think this is a well-trained, well-positioned. The 6 hole is a good place to come out of. I just think that, things look really good for Good Magic. Is he the best horse in the field? I don't know. I think this is a talented horse and has a real chance to get there. Realistically, I think coming out of the 6 hole, he's got to stay out of traffic going into that first turn. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing is he's got to find some running room pretty close to the lead. And, I think the real challenge here, Jose Ortiz, who's one of the best in the business, is up in the irons for the jockey ride. And the reality is Jose is going to have to be able to count that pace in his head and know where they're at and make sure he's positioned. I don't think he has to move early, but he's going to have to be close.
I think if Good Magic on the backstretch is sitting in the top 6 positions, in a good position, as long as he's not on the rail. Like you said, if he gets jammed up on that first turn, that's going to be problematic for him. But I think if he's on the backstretch, sitting in decent position, either middle of the pack or perhaps even on the outside in the top 6, I think he's got a good shot at definitely a top 3 spot, if not winning the whole damn thing. But speaking of sires, you mentioned Good Magic is sired by Curlin. And taking it back to a second to your horse, Princess of Sylmar, she was, of course, sired by
Majestic Warrior.
Majestic Warrior
is actually the sire of one of the horses in the Derby. He is the sire of the 8-horse Lone Sailor. Unfortunately for Majestic Warrior, this is kind of a throwout horse for me. If you look, I think the past performances can kind of fool you a little bit. The horse has had 2 seconds the last 2 races out. 2 races back at Fairgrounds, it ran an allowance optional claiming at 50,000. That was a conditional allowance race. Basically came in second against a group of horses that cannot compete in this group. Had a really good Louisiana Derby. The reality is that was a pretty modest pace. They slowed down that last quarter mile. And I just think if in the event he's anywhere close tomorrow, I think that last quarter mile is just going to kill him, and you're going to see him drop out.
Yeah, the thing about Lone Sailor, I mean, the last time we saw a horse of any do anything with those type of odds, I mean, he was sitting at 50-1 after the positions were announced in the 8-hole, no less, and he still couldn't. They still can't even bring up the odds even more than that. I mean, the race is still off tomorrow, so who knows what the odds do? It's hard to see if it moves any more than 10 points or so. I mean, that would be a landslide at this point. 50-1. I mean, we'd have to look at some kind of a race like Mind That Bird did when Mind That Bird won the Derby all those years ago. And Mind That Bird was
Yeah, I want to
56-1,
say
something like that.
something
I mean,
like that.
it
Yeah.
was just obnoxious. And talk about bad beats in gambling career history for me. That's one of them. And I had way too many witnesses in the room for that one too, which is even worse because everyone still never lets me live it down. I've called some great races, called some great winners over the years in my racing gambling career, if you will, or whatever. And but Mind That Bird had too many witnesses that day, and so no one ever lets me live it down. It was awful.
There you go.
Absolutely awful. But we'll talk a little bit more about. I thought Mendelssohn had a pretty good draw at 14, but I want to talk about him later as we're talking about the favorites in this race. A couple of interesting horses that I thought did not fare well in the position, and he still. I mean, at the time, earlier on, even as recent as a month ago, Free Drop Billy was getting a lot of fanfare from the press, and a lot of odds makers were really falling in love with this colt. But now he's a 30-1 shot. He drew the second spot. I mean, damn. I mean, talk about a fall from grace in such a quick time.
So a couple things with Free Drop Billy. He is trained by Dale Romans, who is like the godfather of Churchill Downs. This horse, in fact, broke his maiden on his first try at Churchill last year. Definitely has a little bit of experience over the surface. The reality is, I think this is a horse that doesn't make a ton of sense here. He's going to come from off the pace. And the challenge with the Derby is you got to pass. If he's 15 or 16 down the back stretch, he's got to find a way to get around a wall of horses. And the reality is, if he has to go 7 or 8 wide to get around that wall, it makes it very hard to close down the stretch. Now, has it been done before? It sure has. Robbie Alvarado is a decent jockey, knows the track, knows the situation, knows how to run in a difficult environment. I think it's possible. When I look at what I'm considering doing with Free Drop Billy, I'm looking more at like the back end of a trifecta or maybe a show bet for third. I just think this is going to be a tough race for him to get to the front.
Most of the odds makers that the Kentucky Derby, specifically on KentuckyDerby.com, where they have a bunch of odds makers and so-called experts, and some of them do have great resumes. I'm not trying to make fun of them too much, but Free Drop Billy makes an appearance in nearly every single one of them at the bottom of their top 10. So they don't really expecting too much from that 2 spot. But something that you are expecting, Jim, from our previous conversation is that number 3 spot's pretty interesting to you. Tell us why Promises Fulfilled might, as punny as this sounds, fulfill some promises at 30-1 in that 3 spot.
Well, I'm actually using today's Kentucky Oaks as kind of my argument for Promises Fulfilled as a long shot. Monami Girl went out today and got what I consider to be a pretty easy pace. She was able just to stay on the front and win it. Got a little bit of pressure there towards the end, however, held up for the win. The reality is Promises Fulfilled seems to be the early pace in the race. If you look back at his past performances, he's run that opening quarter anywhere between 21-4 and 22-1. And the reality is that's probably going to be a couple lengths clear of others in the race. I think coming off the rail, Corey Lannery is going to have to get him right out. The reality is that's a jockey that can do that can get him out to the front. If you look at his last race back, he raced in the Florida Derby, ran what I thought to be reasonable fractions for Gulfstream, and then fell apart at the end. If you throw that race out, he's still a decent horse. He's only been beat one other time, throwing out the Florida Derby. Realistically, I think this horse right now is 40. If the odds are correct on my screen, we're at 41-1 on Promises Fulfilled. There's always a chance we're going to catch an easy pace and he can run away on the front. If that doesn't happen, but he's close to the front, maybe he holds up for a second or third. Again, at 40 or 50-1, it's worth a shot.
I'm going to keep an eye on that 3rd spot, Jim. Tomorrow, rest assured. I do have a couple of other favorites that I'm really excited about, and we'll get to favorites here in just a second. One other horse I want to talk about, and then I want to turn the floor over to you as far as another horse that we might be paying attention to. And another one, again, a horse that had a lot of fanfare leading up to this week. Drew a decent spot at 11, and runs a pretty good race. It's kind of small. We've talked about the size, but Bolt de Oro in the 11th spot is an 8-1 favorite. or was earlier this week when they drew the positions. What are your thoughts on Bolt?
You know, I've got to tell you, I was going to the track pretty much every weekend. We had a major prep race, and I fell in love with Bolt de Oro after the San Felipe out at Santa Anita, and that's hard for me. Anyone who knows my horse racing preferences will tell you I have a monster bias against West Coast horses. I don't care for that track as a facility as far as the track goes. I've always been suspicious of the clocks out there. But again, this is a horse I fell in love with at the San Felipe, even in a running second effort. You know, the reality is I think this is a great colt. I think he's going to go on to do pretty good things, probably in that grade 2, grade 3 level. I think he is just good enough to come in 3rd or 4th tomorrow. I just am not super excited about his chances to come up on top. You know, bred out of Medaglia d'Oro, which of course was a fantastic colt as well. Victor Espinoza is the jockey, obviously a Triple Crown winning jockey. The connections there are good all the way around. Again, fantastic colt. I just think he's good enough to be 3rd or 4th.
Any other horses that we should pay attention to in regards to the position they drew and where they might surprise us?
You know, the horse I really like here, and I really like Magnum Moon coming out of the 16 hole. Magnum's chance, again, this is a Todd Pletcher trained horse. The whole trick here is Luis Saez has got to get this horse into some clean running room. Coming out of that auxiliary gate out to the far right there is a tough trick. Luis not only got to get him clear, but he's got to get him, you know, over pretty reasonably placed early. My only concern there is he may burn him up trying to get him out and over. If he is able to get up there and the pace is moderate, I think it sets up for him to do really good things. He is one of the 3 horses I have with a real chance to win the race.
I like Magnum Moon. I'm worried about the position. That's what kind of got me worried about it. I am surprised that coming off the pole position selection that 6-1 were the odds at the time. It's pretty favorable considering the position that he's in and the challenge that he's going to have, because he's going to have to come over not only most of the field, but some pretty challenging thoroughbreds in the 1 to 14 spot in order to get to kind of get up towards the front of the pace. So it'll be interesting.
Let me share one more thought with you on Magnum Moon, which is this is the only reason I think this is a compelling colt in the situation. Todd Pletcher, when he trains, absolutely hates bullet workouts. He hates his horses lighting up the time card in the morning. When you look back at his training, 2 last training sessions coming into the Derby, he had 2 bullet workouts, one on March 31st, one on April 7th. Now, for a trainer who hates to see bullets in his training times, I'm almost wondering if he thought, okay, if we catch a bad draw, I need to know that horse can get out. Because, again, the only way Magnum Moon, I think, is close is if they're stalking that early pace. You know, if he's more than 5 or 6 lengths back, I don't think there's a big chance. So, again, when, you know, I think there other horses in here that are really great? Yes. When I look at the way he's been trained, it makes me wonder kind of what the thought process is. And, you know, clearly I think he's got a chance to get out of that gate and get up towards the front.
I agree on that point, for sure, and there'll be something. So keep your eyes on a couple of, well, Magnum Moon certainly isn't a long shot, but on Promises Fulfilled and Magnum Moon, 2 interesting courses to keep your eyes on, particularly early in the race. That'll be some fun watching as we watch them from opposite sides of the gate, try to either dictate the pace or get over and catch up to the pace early on in the race and see what happens. Now, something else that so moving over to the favorites coming off the position selection earlier this week, Justify and Mendelssohn kind of shot up to the top as far as the odds-on favorites to win this race, and a lot of the odds makers are replacing them in the win and place kind of interchangeably at this point. You see them kind of swapping position quite a bit. I like Mendelssohn. We've talked about off the air about this particular horse. There's a lot of speed in that steed. He's a fantastic animal. Of course, the question is, again, you know, in the 14 slot, got to get ahead, got to get up, got to get out of that gate quickly. But how do you feel about Justify and also Mendelssohn?
So the thing with Justify is trained by Bob Baffert out of Windstar Farm. Absolutely fantastic colt, lightly raced. Again, my gut reaction is to go against him a little bit because it's a horse coming out of the West Coast. However, the times have just, his running times have been good. The reality is, I think Justify. Mike Smith even said as much after his last race in the Santa Anita Derby. He could have gone faster. He ended up winning, drawing away by 6 to 8 lengths, and he just didn't have to. If Smith actually pushes that horse, I don't know what's going to happen. He very well could blow this field out. I think the talent is there. The ability to run the distance is there. It's really just going to come down to, how that initial pace looks and what happens. Again, coming out of the 7 hole, he's in a great spot. As long as he doesn't get bumped or have trouble coming out of the gate, he should be good. Should be good to get out front.
And what about Mendelssohn?
My one concern with Mendelssohn, and I really like him as a horse, to back up just a little bit, I think to be considered in the realm of the greatest horses ever, there's a couple things I like to see. I like to see them be able to win in multiple jurisdictions, so West Coast, East Coast, maybe overseas. I also like to see them be able to win on multiple surfaces. So maybe they can win on a dirt course or the turf. You look at Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn checks all of my boxes. He has shipped to the U.S. and won. He has raced in Europe and won. He went to the Middle East for the UAE Derby a couple weeks ago and completely obliterated that field. Just a fantastic horse. He checks my box for everything I look for in a superstar. The flying over in the last 3 weeks coming back from the UAE Derby, I think that's tough on the horses. Interesting thing here is trainer Aidan O'Brien has a deal where 2 other horses travel with Mendelssohn at all times. So he has his kind of gang that comes with him when he travels. Part of that, I know when you go to the back stretch, some trainers have a dog and the dog will adopt a horse. This is just 2 other horses adopting a horse, and they train together and they're barned together. And I think it's a really good idea. This will be, if we end up getting a Mendelssohn winner, this will be the first European horse and European trainer to do it. I think the connections here surely have a chance. The big thing is, when I look at that race in the UAE, the thing that jumps out at me is he did not have to push to win that race. It was basically a hand ride. He never got the crop, and that last quarter mile in that race was a blowout quarter under no urging at all. So, as long as the trip over didn't take it out of him, and he's comfortable, and the crazy crowd there at the Kentucky Derby doesn't upset him, I think we have a real chance with him.
I think the sad thing is again, like you said, he didn't necessarily need to race that race. He didn't need to be pushed hard to win it and obliterate the field, as you so eloquently put it. The concerning factor to me is if he doesn't perform well or even doesn't win, the team ownership, management, and trainer is going to have a lot to answer for by taking him over for that race so close to the Derby.
Well, it's at the end of the day, I always remind people this is a business. The UAE Derby is a $2 million purse. I think the winner got paid $800,000. At the end of the day, everyone has a budget, and Derek Smith certainly has to write the checks to pay for his barn. The reality is it's set up to be a sweet spot, and it was a great payday. You look at Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn's won $1.2 million. Certainly looks to add to that tomorrow. The reality is Aidan O'Brien's been looking for a horse to bring to Kentucky to really play. There's no doubt in my mind that this is the best horse in his string, and it just makes sense. So you have owners willing to write the check. You have a horse that's paid his way. It just makes sense to me. Again, running back on a couple weeks rest, coming into 1.25 miles, it's a lot. But when you look at this horse, again, multiple surfaces, multiple jurisdictions, the horse just knows how to win. It's got good connections, a deep pocketbook. I just feel like this is a pretty good shot.
All right. Well, fantastic. So before we get into the most anticipated part of today's take, which would probably, which was what people are thinking, what we're thinking to win, place, and show in tomorrow's 144th running of the Derby. Are there any other things that we need to be on the lookout before you and I choose our favorites?
Well, I think if you're looking to bet the race, the Kentucky Derby ultimately is wide open. It's 20 horses banging around on 2 turns. If you have a favorite color horse or you like a name, there's nothing wrong with putting $2 down and giving it a shot. God knows crazier things have won at the races.
Mind that bird.
That's exactly right. So, yeah, it's just, as far as what to look for, again, it all comes down to getting a clean trip, and then the jockey has to give the horse the best chance to win. The jockey's got to have that pace of the race in his head and have his horse in the right place to do it. And as long as, if those stars line up and you stay out of trouble, that's how you win a Kentucky Derby.
That's fantastic. Any other insight into handicapping this field, or any other tips as far as that's concerned?
Well, again, with 20 horses, you kind of throw most of the rules out of the window. I think the pace tomorrow is going to be extremely fast. Like I said, there's one or two horses that if they get out front, they can run that opening quarter mile in 21-4, 22 flat. That will set it up for the people coming in that second tier of horses. Most of the favorites we talked about, I think, are going to be right on their heels in that second tier. In the event everybody gets tired, I think you've got a chance with the horses coming from the back, Free Drop Billy, horses like that. Again, it's people always ask me, well, what do you think's going to happen? Well, what I think's going to happen is they're going to run really fast in the first half mile. If they don't, everything I just talked about, throw it out the window, because anything can happen.
It's interesting. We talked about the weather being a concern before and off air, Jim. I think the track looks in pretty good condition. We did have some rain come through Texas here. I don't know if it's going to make its way up there, but if this track gets muddy, it's even more of a wild card race in my mind.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for the late closers to close into a muddy track. You see the guys out front have a little bit of a break. The reality is I don't think they're going to get rain. They were expecting a mess today, and they didn't really get it. I watched the Oaks, and the track looked just absolutely fantastic. Temperature and everything is just about as perfect as you can get for a horse race. So, I feel like no one's going to get the weather excuse tomorrow.
Which is good. It'll be for a good race, and it'll be for a good time for the thousands of people that get to enjoy the 144th running of the Kentucky Derby, the Run for the Roses. And I think I've stalled quite a bit enough. I think everyone's ready, Jim, to hear who you and I will think will win, place, and show in tomorrow's Derby. So, as you were the guest, I will let you close out the show. I'm going to go ahead and go with mine first. I will be rude in this case because I think it is more polite to let the guest of honor go last and close out the show with his picks. So I was really excited as you and I discussed off air, Jim. I was really excited about Mendelssohn, particularly as you very, very well put. I think the fact that he's been very impressive on multiple surfaces and in multiple arenas is just too much of a quality to ignore. This horse is lightning fast, and with the track staying relatively dry tomorrow, I think if he gets out of that gate quickly, even in the pad position that he's in at 14, Mendelssohn's going to be a hard horse to beat tomorrow. I really like Mendelssohn. Good Magic, I really like the Arkansas Derby. I by accident called him as a winner because I thought I misread an article on Facebook proclaiming him as the winner, and I actually called it a little early, and I ended up being right, and it was totally, I'm not taking any credit for it whatsoever. It was totally by accident. But Good Magic is a fantastic horse that I really like. And like I said earlier in today's take, I don't think there's a horse in this field of his talent that could have drawn a better position than the number 6 spot that Good Magic was in. A 12-1 at the time of the selection could not be better. Is it a juicy pick? Not really. But it's something. It's a horse I think that will do really well. I do like Justify. I do like the favorite a lot, and Bob Baffert certainly can rest on his laurels in terms of his accomplishments in the world of horse racing. However, there's just something to be said about the favorite in the favorite in the Derby. Sometimes favorites have won in the past, several times actually, and but there's something I just get the feeling about with this horse. I think this field is just too close to call, and that for that reason, I do not have Justify in my top 3 actually. So my top 3 is actually rounded out this way. I have Mendelssohn winning the race. in a very, very, I'm calling it a close race, but fast, perhaps even record-breaking or close to it, with the track condition that we're expecting and with Mendelssohn's lightning speed. I have Mendelssohn winning the race. Placing behind him shortly is Good Magic. And my show pick for this race, I'm going completely off the tail, and we didn't even discuss this horse at all, but I am actually going to go with Vino Rosso, who has actually gotten a little bit of fanfare in the press as of late, and so I'm kind of excited about Vino Rosso. We didn't really talk about him today, but I'm going to have him in my third place finish. So I have Mendelssohn, Good Magic, Vino Rosso, Volta Oro, and Volta Oro and Justified round out my top 5. Jim, the floor is yours, and I'm excited to hear this.
Well, I'll touch on Vino Rosso for you just for a second. Got J.R. Velasquez up in the irons on him. Interesting story today. He kind of got an oddly beaten second in the Oaks. He was honestly fairly butthurt about it and actually made a jockey's objection to the outcome of the race. The stewards decided that the winner did not impede his path. The one thing I've learned in watching horse racing is a pissed off Johnny tends to like to come back and get on the board the next day. So that certainly is a positive for Vino Rosso. I think coming out of that 18 hole is going to be a tough spot. You and I are lined up on our winner. I really think if Mendelssohn gets his race, I think this could be, like you said, very possibly a record-breaking run. I've got Mendelssohn on top, a couple other horses I like up there. Magnum Moon. I'm also pretty crazy about the 16, Magnum Moon, the 16, the 7, Justify. You know, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, and I do this every year. I'm going to take 4 or 5 horses in first place on an exacta ticket, and I'm going to pick 8 or 9 horses, put them in second place behind it. The ticket's probably going to cost me about $45. The reality is if our top 2 favorites win, I'm probably going to lose $10 or $15. If I can somehow get one of my 30 or 40 to 1 long shots into second, that's a $500 or $600 ticket. My word of advice, and anyone who's been to the track with me knows I love to scream for a long shot. You know what? Put $5 down on the 3 Promises Fulfilled. I think that horse is going to go to post at 40 to 1. If by some miracle he wins the race and you have $5 on him, it's going to give you back $205. That seems like a good way to spend $5 to me.
If nothing else, it's certainly going to be an entertaining race for sure with Promises Fulfilled. Keep your eye on Promises Fulfilled, Magnum Moon, Good Magic, Vino Rosso, Lone Sailor, who is fathered by the same sire that fathered the Princess of Sylmar, who was the 2013 Kentucky Oaks champion and co-owned by our guest, Jim Stanco. A lot of great horses, a beautiful field. Mendelssohn, Noble Indy, Combatant, Solimini, Magnum Moon, Instilled Regard, Bravazzo, Enticed, Volta Oro, Might Boy Jack, Hofberg, Justify, Audible, Flame Away, Free Drop Billy, and Ferenz Fire all round out this field. No particular order. I just listed all 20 entrants. And I hope you guys have a fantastic Kentucky Derby day tomorrow. I'm really excited about this year's race. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's show. Hope you all enjoy tomorrow's race, and look forward to the Preakness, the Belmont, but most importantly, we're looking forward to Kentucky Derby 145 next year because it's awesome. So, but until then, enjoy tomorrow's race. Enjoy tonight. Light up a fine cigar because that's what we do. And find some Woodford Reserve and toast tomorrow's entrance. And Jim Stanco, everybody. My very privileged to have him as a guest tonight. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Couldn't have made it an awesome show without you. It was fantastic.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, Bear. Anytime.
So awesome. So everyone, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. This was our 29th take, believe it or not, of ELOSOFUMARTAKES. I'm Bear Duplessis, your host as always, live from the Casa Cueva studios of Euless, Texas. Tomorrow is the 144th running of the Kentucky Derby. We talked all about it. Rewind it, watch it again, and make those bets, everybody. Unless you are under the age of 21, we don't want to get in trouble. Enjoy the race for what it is, a fantastic American event. and hum along every year as I do, everybody, with my old Kentucky home, even though I was born and raised in the great state of Texas. We thank everyone for tuning in. Again, this was our 29th take on ELOSOFUMARTAKES. We'll see you next time.